is you then prep for covering our Mariners tomorrow, right? On a national level, you're going to be, I believe, in the booth with Goldie, our own, and you start to kind of prep for them. How do you do that this late in the year, John? Do you look at numbers?
So yeah,
What's your methodology?
So I wait till last minute because in baseball, so many things can change, right? I keep a one eye over looking long term what they're doing, but I'll get in tonight and then I'll work all day tomorrow. Well, not all day, but 3 to 4 hours, and catch up with some of the things that have changed. I look at the numbers to base where they're at, but I'm really looking at where their hitters are at and what some of the trends that they're going through, because there's always the hot and cold streaks of baseball. And then I'll watch video of the pitchers in their last couple starts just to see, where they're at. I learned a lesson a long time ago when I prepped for a Saturday game on a Wednesday, Thursday, thinking, man, I've gotten ahead of the game and I'm ready to go. And then you show up Saturday and that pitcher you spent 2 hours on isn't pitching for some reason because of a rainout, or those hitters that you thought were going to be in the lineup aren't in the lineup. So it really is day of game or night before, because baseball is fluid. At this point, what I like about this point is everything's pretty much established, right? Your hitters aren't going to change that much. They are what they are. Your team is going through the last push or positioning themselves in a strength type playoff run. So I like this time. The time of the year I don't like is the first month and a half, because there's really nothing to go on and too many things can change. And then when it's the playoffs, I hunker down and really get into the weeds about what that team and that matchup, and go through the whole year of who they played and how, who they've had success against. So it really ramps up here in about a month for me, and that's what I love about the playoffs.
So one of the strange things about this team is, for the last few years, obviously, it has been led by its starting pitching, and we've talked about it over and over and over again. And then since the trade deadline, look, this offense is now good. I mean, objectively, it's just a really good offense. And yet somehow the starting pitching has not quite lived up to it, especially on the road. Dan Plesac was on the station yesterday talking about some of the differences in pitching home versus road. For you, as you look at this group of 5 pitchers, why would they be struggling the way they are on the road, and how do they fix that?
Yeah, those things never made sense to me. I tried to, we were asked these questions when we were playing, and it just kind of is weird sometimes. Like, I look at one-run wins and losses. That's not something you can sustain year in and year out. Sometimes you go through what the Braves are going through and what really some teams who don't have success, Boston Red Sox, who are in the mix, have had a really tough one-run record. And then you have teams who have unbelievable success, and you go, well, why is that? And the home and road splits don't typically, unless you're Colorado, maybe like Cincinnati, Boston, New York, where you have these ballparks that are really geared towards certain type hitting, that might be a little bit more accurate. You see what Baltimore did? And they moved. Now that whole thing changes because they moved that fence back to about 380 in left field. So the home and road splits don't always guarantee anything, but you have to look at them. And if a manager doesn't look, I think I asked managers, he said, when it's glaring, I really make those decisions. When it's just something you go, I don't think it's going to last, then I don't put too much stock into it. But the Mariners have had some kind of weird games lately where you think they should have won some of these games, and it comes down to that last couple years. Can they get to the point where A, they believe, and B, they can win those close games and punch that ticket? And if they punch that ticket, then I think that starting pitching gets a little bit of an adrenaline boost. But I've watched them over the years and how they've performed. This might be one of those little bit of an outlier years because they're probably not performing as well as expected, just based on how good they've been in the past.
I know Mike's going to want to dig into some questions as a starter, maybe is transitioning into a reliever role. Maybe a second guy will do that into the postseason run as well, and you're familiar with both of those. But when I say the name Josh Naylor, Eugenio Suarez, what are the first couple things that come to your mind?
The first couple things that come to my mind is, boy, oh boy, did they need the offense, right? Seattle's biggest thing has been they have struggled to score runs on a consistent basis, and it's probably the reason they've missed the playoffs a couple times. So, they got the corners that right and left, and it's just it's a huge boost. Now, this has been a strange year for mega trades on teams that you would think just went like the Mets until recently. How in the world has that not worked out? And then the Padres have been back and forth with their mega moves. I thought Seattle did the most with the least amount of moves in improving their chances from where they sat to what their offense is now. And that's got to be a clubhouse. I know I've been there when we got a Fred McGriff, or we got we made all those kind of trades that you're looking to your management. You're going, please, please, please. And I just think that was the difference. I still think it's going to be the difference for Seattle's success.
Doesn't hurt when one of those guys has crazy edge like Naylor does, and the other guy is about as well-liked a teammate as you're ever going to find in Suarez. So, yeah, I think that's all really well said. So you made the transition, not always because you wanted to, but you did the starter bullpen back again, and we're watching it now with one and maybe two guys. Emerson Hancock is in the pen. We haven't seen him yet at the major league level, but after being a starter his whole career, he's had, I think, 2 or 3 appearances in the minors. And now, here you go, buddy. I hope the 99-mile-an-hour fastball plays up. We may see Bryce Miller do the same thing if this team makes the playoffs. How long does it take? How hard is it? What do we need to know about transitioning from a starter role to a bullpen role?
Yeah, I literally feel bad that people use my scenario as a gauge or barometer. It's not even close to being fair. I had 2,400 innings as a starter before I went and on my own became a reliever that ended up being a closer. These young kids, they're not given it's not fair to them. It's not that easy. And I know everybody thinks that we got this robotic Stratomatic baseball player that can plug and place. They don't understand the pitchability of what you have to do. You can't just rear back and blow everybody away. I'd say the biggest misconception is when you go to the pen, they want guys that get swing and miss. They don't want contact guys. And that can be good and bad when you have guys that know how to do that and have been in the role a long time. But when you're taking a young man who has no experience and you just transition his stuff thinking that's going to be – it's a whole different routine, the preparation, the mindset, the adrenaline, everything about it. I'll just simplify it by saying this. It's a role that has too much blame and too much credit. And you only get interviewed when you mess up. And fortunately for me, in 3 years, I messed up 9 times. And I got interviewed 9 times. But that was, you remember the Jabba Chamberlain and all the guys? There have been more pitchers ruined by this fluctuality of back and forth, bullpen starter. I call it de-developing greatness. You suffocate the growth of a pitcher. And I'm not talking about when there's a need like right now, right? When the team is in need of something, that's totally different. But when you're trying to piece together innings and you're allowing this young man or a young stud to go to the pen without throwing his other pitches and improving, and the future is for him to be a starter, I think it's a disservice. So but we're in a different game, and I know I might be a dinosaur, but I'm just telling you from experience, and experience means nothing in this game when you pass it on. It means nothing. People making decisions could care less about experience, could care less about resumes, could care less. They think of it totally different, as we're in a different area and a different era, and this is what we need the guy to do, and this is what we're going to tell him to do. So it's not that easy, okay? And that's what I basically tell people. Career closers lasted a long time in our business. They don't anymore. You couldn't come up with a closer. I can't think of a closer other than Kenley Jansen. I think he's recently been hurt. But I can't think of guys now where you look at and go, oh, that guy's been that way forever. They just shuffle the deck with them. And that's why there's so much volatility in the bullpens these days, because it's tough to sustain that kind of greatness for a long time.
So when you get to Cleveland and you start to study tomorrow, you're going to study Emerson Hancock. You're going to look at his numbers in the bigs and in Tacoma and his last 3 outings in relief. And you know what's going to happen. This is just the way baseball works, Johnny. It's going to be a 5-2 Mariner lead in the 8th inning, and here comes Emerson Hancock to make his first relief appearance as a professional baseball player. And the first words out of your mouth could be what?
I think the first words are going to be, this is going to be a great 30-day trial, right? Yeah. I mean, it's 30 days of learning on the job and seeing what he can do and having a scenario that plays out where, there's going to be time to figure out how this thing's going to work. And when you have this kind of arm and this kind of dynamics, you're going to find things out. I think this 30 days is going to be way greater than just 2 weeks for sure.
So I don't know what's going on. I don't really understand how the whole algorithm works on social media or any of that. But as soon as I said that we were going to be having you on the show today, somehow it knew to start feeding me John Smoltz clips, which is really remarkable and kind of terrifying at the same time. But because of it, I got to see your thoughts on realignment. And they're different, that's for sure. Do you think you could just explain to folks what you think realignment could or should look like?
Well, I think if they add 2 teams in the big league someday and they realign, they put the teams in a place where you're going to have the demographics make more sense. You're going to have travel make more sense. You're going to have all these things that for a sport that plays as long as we do, I've always said, it's been so difficult to see the travel and the divisions that put together, and I think you got a chance to make baseball pretty dynamic if you do that. And the West Coast teams, we all know what they're up against. Same thing with the East Coast down in Tampa and Miami. So I think there's a way to make this thing pop. I'm a big believer. If you're going to make some changes, go all in, make it the way you want it, and you won't have to do much later. And you can make this these issues in baseball that every sport seems to have when it comes to whether it's labor negotiations or the dynamics of how you get better competitiveness and a more competitive environment. I'm a huge fan of the first half, second half situation. 4 divisions of 8. Got to get the number to 32 or nothing's going to change. So you got to get an even number. And if we can do that and collectively get the game in a place where the competitive imbalances in certain cities would be forced to think differently, because you don't have a 162 game schedule that you just have to be able to win one of those first halves, and any team could be competitive for that period. Imagine teams getting beat up with injuries like we saw this year, and instead of rebooting and selling the farm, they just know they got a fresh start in the second half. And I know there's a lot of people traditional, and everyone thinks, well, what are you doing? Well, that ship has sailed. We've already changed the traditional game with all kinds of rule changes because it demanded it. So I'm all for that.
It'd be a big change. We'll discuss it maybe a little bit more. But thank you. This was great. Lots of great stuff for us to take forward, and looking forward to having you on the call tomorrow with Aaron. And get a chance to see these Mariners. I'll tell you what, they're an interesting team. They can hit a little bit. They got some interesting dudes. You ever been around Randy Arozarena?
I've seen him from afar and watched him during that crazy COVID World Series that he was awesome. He was a star during that time, and he certainly is very interesting at best.
All right, and shame on us. We just went 15 minutes and didn't even mention Cal Raleigh. Maybe you've heard he's pretty good this year, but we'll talk about him another time. John, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thanks for your time today.
All right, my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
There you go. There's John Smoltz.